For months, Claire manipulated the silence of a child to secure her place at the altar. She smiled at Michael, the widowed father, with practiced tenderness, and turned cold the moment his 8-year-old son Lucas was left alone with her. She thought he was just a quiet, obedient boy, easy to silence, easy to overlook. But when they picked Lucas, they didn't know who they were messing with. They didn't know he was a silent witness, a quiet protector, and the only person brave enough to speak the truth when no one else would. What came next wasn't just a ruined wedding, it was a revelation. The mask fell, the plan crumbled, and the world finally listened. Before we go any further, comment where in the world you're watching from, and make sure to subscribe, because the story you're about to hear isn't just about one man, it's about all of us. The sunlight filtered through the stained glass windows of the chapel, casting warm light onto polished pews and anxious faces. A soft breeze stirred the petals in the aisle, but for one small boy, standing alone with a pillow of rings in his trembling hands, this wasn't a ceremony. It was a crossroads. 8-year-old Lucas lived with his father Michael, who had been a widower for more than 2 years. Their life was simple, peaceful, until the day Michael announced he was going to marry a woman named Claire. Michael looked like a new man, smiling more, humming while making coffee, eyes brighter with each passing day. Lucas, watching from the kitchen doorway, said nothing. But inside, something felt off. From the moment he met Claire, Lucas sensed a chill. Her eyes never lingered on him for long, and when they did, they felt cold. Yet in front of Michael, she was the perfect woman, gentle, nurturing, affectionate. Have you ever met someone whose eyes told a very different story from their smile? Lucas tried to bring it up once. Michael just smiled, patted his head. She's a good woman, son. Give her time. Lucas didn't want to upset his father, so he stayed silent. But silence never soothed a gut feeling. It only gave it time to grow, like a stone dropped into a deep well, quiet but sinking fast. Sometimes, grown-ups get so caught up chasing their version of happiness, they forget to listen to the softest voices in the room, the voices that often speak the most truth. Are you listening to the smallest voices in your life? The day Claire moved in, something changed in the atmosphere of the house. It wasn't loud or obvious. There were no slamming doors, no shouting matches. It was quieter than that. Quieter, and somehow more chilling. Lucas felt it the first night, during dinner. Michael was in high spirits, talking about his day at work, about a new client, about how wonderful it felt to come home to a full house again. Claire laughed along, her hand brushing Michael's arm, her voice velvety with affection. Lucas sat at the edge of his seat, nodding when spoken to, picking at his peas. Later that evening, while Michael was in the garage looking for an old photo album, Claire came into the living room where Lucas was watching a cartoon. She stood behind him for a long moment without saying anything. Then, in a flat voice, she said, "Turn that down, it's too loud." Lucas fumbled for the remote. "Sorry," he mumbled. "No need to apologize," she said, walking off. But the words felt more like an instruction than reassurance. The days that followed painted a pattern. In front of Michael, Claire was glowing. She laughed at Lucas's jokes, even the ones that didn't make sense. She asked about school, helped him bake cookies, and clapped a little too eagerly when he showed her a drawing. But when they were alone, her eyes narrowed, her tone shifted, and her smile disappeared. One afternoon, Lucas spilled a cup of juice on the table. He rushed to grab a towel, panic blooming in his chest. Claire arrived before he could clean it. "You really are clumsy, aren't you?" she whispered, her hand gripping his small wrist just a little too tightly. "Your father has no idea how much work you are." Her nails didn't break skin, but they left a memory. The look in her eyes did more damage than bruises ever could. Have you ever lived in a home that changed its personality depending on who was watching? Lucas started eating faster, talking less, smiling only when Michael looked at him. Because when someone in your own house makes you feel like a problem that needs to be managed, you learn to shrink yourself. You learn that safety isn't always about locked doors, it's about who holds the key to being believed. Michael didn't see it. He saw Claire holding Lucas's hand in public. He heard her praising him at the dinner table. He felt lucky. Lucas, meanwhile, was starting to forget what it felt like to feel safe in his own home. The paper airplanes were all lined up on the edge of Lucas's windowsill, 7 of them, folded carefully, wings sharp and crisp. Each one a small attempt to make sense of a world that no longer felt steady. It was past bedtime. The house was quiet, except for the soft hum of his father's jazz playlist drifting up from the living room speaker. Lucas sat cross-legged on his bedroom carpet, fiddling with the last plane, his fingers trembling. He had tried to be strong, he had tried to stay quiet, like Claire told him. But his heart couldn't take it anymore. He walked down the hallway in his socks, the carpet muffling his steps. At the end of the hall, a warm glow came from the study. Michael was there, glasses perched on his nose, reading through a contract. The sight used to calm Lucas. Tonight it only made him hesitate. "Dad?" Lucas's voice was barely above a whisper. Michael looked up and immediately smiled. "Hey, buddy." "What's up? Can't sleep?" Lucas shook his head, then stepped in, clutching the paper plane in both hands like it might shield him. "Can I talk to you about something?" "Of course," Michael said, closing the folder and gesturing to the seat across from him. "You can always talk to me." Lucas sat down slowly, eyes fixed on the folds of his airplane. "It's about Claire." Michael leaned forward, concern flickering briefly across his face. Lucas took a breath so deep it shuddered in his chest. "I don't think she likes me." Silence. Michael blinked, then leaned back with a soft chuckle. "Oh, buddy, she does like you. She talks about you all the time when you're not around. She's new to all this too. Give her a chance, okay?" Lucas tried to respond, but his throat closed up. Michael reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "She's a good woman. You'll see." And that was it. Conversation over. Door closed. Have you ever opened your heart only to realize the person on the other end wasn't ready to hold it? Lucas nodded and stood, mumbling something about being tired. He walked back to his room slower than before, the paper airplane still clutched in his hand. He didn't throw it. He tucked it under his bed, like a secret. That night, he didn't cry. He just lay in bed staring at the ceiling, learning a quiet truth. Sometimes, even the people who love you most don't always know how to protect you. And sometimes they don't want to hear what might shatter their happiness. From that moment, Lucas stopped trying to explain. He stopped offering his truth in the hope it would be understood. He folded it up like one more paper plane and kept it to himself. Are you paying attention to the words left unspoken by the people who trust you most? The church was dressed like a dream, pillars wrapped in soft white chiffon, rows of guests seated in anticipation, pale rose petals scattered down the aisle like a path to something sacred. Candlelight flickered in quiet rhythms, casting a golden glow that warmed even the coldest corners of the room. It was the kind of setting people imagine when they think of second chances, when love gets another shot at forever. Michael stood at the altar, straight-backed and glowing in his tuxedo. His smile didn't just show in his mouth, it radiated from his eyes, his posture, his presence. He was a man who believed, truly believed, that today marked a new beginning. And beside the altar, clutching a small satin pillow in trembling hands, stood Lucas. He was dressed just like his father, tiny bow tie, tiny black shoes, hair combed to the side. To everyone watching, he looked like a picture of poise. A perfect ring bearer, but if they had looked closer, they would have seen the truth. How tightly his fingers clenched the pillow, how his breath came in shallow waves, how his eyes flicked toward the doors again and again, waiting. He didn't want to ruin his father's day. He didn't want to be wrong. But he had seen too much, heard too much, and today the weight of truth sat heavier than the rings he carried. The music began, soft organ chords rising through the room. Heads turned, the doors opened, and there she was. Claire, dressed in a gown of lace and light, her golden hair styled in soft waves. She moved slowly, gracefully, with a smile that could disarm suspicion. To everyone present, she was beauty, elegance, redemption. To Lucas, she was danger wrapped in silk. He watched her take each step, watched his father's eyes shine with tears, watched the distance between them shrink. Inside him, something screamed, "Not yet, not now, not this." Then the officiant's voice echoed, "If anyone here has reason why these two should not be joined in holy matrimony, speak now, or forever hold your peace." A pause, a silence, a wait. Lucas looked at his father, then at Claire. He remembered the phone calls, the whispers, the photos. He remembered being told to stay quiet. And then, "Wait!" His voice rang out, sharp and sudden, slicing through the silence like a bell. Gasps rippled across the pews. All eyes turned. Claire's face froze mid-smile. Michael's head snapped toward his son, confusion flooding his features. Lucas took a breath. His voice was shaking, but it rose anyway. "You can't marry her, Dad. She's lying to you. I heard everything." Have you ever seen someone so small stand so tall? In that single moment, everything changed. The music stopped, the room shifted, the story unraveled, and the truth finally had a voice. For a moment, no one moved. The chapel was suspended in a breathless silence, like the very air didn't know what to do with the words that had just been spoken. Michael turned to his son, his face a picture of disbelief. His voice, when it came, was soft, shaken. "Lucas, what are you talking about?" Claire stood perfectly still, one manicured hand frozen around her bouquet. Her smile remained, but her eyes, those carefully curated eyes, narrowed just for a second. Lucas's chest rose and fell, shallow and rapid. "I heard her, Dad. At night, on the phone. She was talking to someone named Mark. About a plan, about insurance money, about you." A collective murmur passed through the congregation. Guests shifted in their seats. Some turned toward Claire, others toward Michael. Claire let out a soft, breathy laugh. "Oh, sweetheart," she cooed, stepping forward, her voice laced with honey. "I know all of this is a big change for you. A new family can feel scary, can't it?" She turned to the crowd with a gentle shrug. "He's had a hard time, adjusting. Poor thing probably overheard me talking to our planner about wedding insurance. It's standard, right?" But Lucas didn't flinch. He took a step closer to his father. "That's not what it was. She said once you were married they'd start phase 2. She said, you didn't suspect a thing." Claire's face went pale for just a second before she caught herself. "Michael," she said, her tone trembling but still polished, "you don't actually believe this, do you? He's a child. A scared, jealous child." Michael looked between the two of them. His heart was racing, though he didn't yet understand why. "Claire, is any of this true?" And then Lucas delivered the final blow. "I saw it, Dad, on her laptop. The policy, the emails. Pictures of her and Mark. They're not wedding planners, they're together." The room swayed. Claire's jaw tightened. Her smile vanished, and in its place something real appeared, something raw and seething. "You little brat," she hissed, venomous and low, the bouquet slipping from her fingers. "You've ruined everything." A gasp broke through the pews. Claire froze. She had let it slip. She had dropped the mask. Michael's voice was a whisper. "Claire, what did you just call my son?" For the first time, she didn't answer. Her eyes darted around the chapel. Every face now stared back with suspicion, disbelief, judgment. The perfect image she had crafted for months was shattering right in front of her. She took a shaky step back. Michael took one forward. "I asked you a question," he said again, his voice firmer. "What have you done?" Claire's breath hitched. And then, without another word, she turned, lifting the hem of her gown, and ran down the aisle. Guests rose, some shouted, the organist stood, stunned, the bride fled, and with her the illusion of love, safety, and a second chance crumbled. But Lucas didn't cry. He stood in the aisle, eyes locked on the place she had stood, his father beside him, no longer blind, because for the first time, the truth wasn't ignored, it was believed. As Claire disappeared through the chapel doors, the world inside erupted, voices tangled in confusion. Some guests stood frozen, others rushed to the aisles. Michael, still processing the moment, stood motionless, his chest rising and falling as if his body had to remind him to breathe. Lucas tugged at his father's sleeve, voice trembling. "Dad, she's getting away!" Those words jolted Michael into motion. His hands fumbled for his phone as he stepped away from the altar, dialing with urgency. 911, the dispatcher answered. Yes, my fiancé just ran out of our wedding. My son, he said she was planning to harm me. For life insurance. She just fled the building. Her name is Claire Evans. No, Sarah, actually. She might be using an alias. Behind him, murmurs swelled. Someone began recording on a phone. Others simply stared. The dream wedding had become a crime scene. Meanwhile, Lucas stood near the front pew, heart hammering. It was over, he thought. The worst part is over. But then the doors creak again, and someone else walked in. A tall man in a dark coat with short black hair and a deep scar above his left eyebrow. He paused just inside the doorway, scanning the room with tense, searching eyes. Lucas's breath caught. "That's him," he whispered, to no one in particular. "That's Mark." Michael turned, following his son's gaze. Recognition clicked like a trap snapping shut. "Officers," Michael called into the phone. "He's here. The man from the photos, the one she was working with, he just walked in." Within seconds, a uniformed officer, already stationed near the entrance, approached Mark. "Sir, I need you to step outside with me," the officer said. Mark didn't wait. He bolted, pushing past stunned guests, knocking over a floral display, his dress shoes pounding down the steps, into the courtyard. "Hey, stop him!" someone yelled. Another officer gave chase. Guests poured out of the building, drawn to the chaos. It felt surreal, like a movie unfolding in real time. Inside the chapel, Lucas remained frozen. His small hands trembled. For months, he had been the only one who knew. For months, he had carried it alone. Now, the world was watching. Now, the danger had a face. Do you believe that truth, when pushed to the edge, will always find a way out? Mark didn't get far. Within 2 blocks, officers tackled him near a cafe parking lot. He was handcuffed, breathless, muttering things Lucas didn't understand. But he saw the fear in Mark's eyes, the unraveling of control. Back at the station, under questioning, Mark confessed. He told them everything. Claire's real name was Sarah Connor. She wasn't just a liar. She was a professional con artist with a history of targeting wealthy, widowed men. Mark had been her partner for years. Romantic partner. Criminal partner. Together, they'd seduced, manipulated, and stolen. But this time, they'd planned something darker. With Michael, it wasn't just about inheritance or stealing assets. It was about death. It was about insurance. Sarah had insisted on a massive life insurance policy shortly after the engagement. $5 million, double payout on accidental death, no close family, just Michael and his son. Mark admitted their plan. Marry him, go on a honeymoon, stage a fatal accident, then vanish. Lucas listened to pieces of the interview through the door at the station. He didn't understand all the legal words, but he understood enough. He understood that he had saved his father's life, and sometimes the smallest voice, the one nobody listens to at first, becomes the one that changes everything. The house didn't look any different. The same soft beige curtains swayed with the afternoon breeze. The same worn rug sat curled slightly at the corners. The same framed photo of Michael and Lucas, taken on a hiking trip 2 years earlier, still hung in the hallway. But inside, everything had changed. The silence no longer carried tension. It no longer whispered warnings in the hallway or weighed down the corners of each room. The silence now was gentler, a space to breathe, to think, to begin again. Michael and Lucas sat side by side on the living room couch, a half-eaten pizza between them, the TV off. They hadn't said much that day. And for once, they didn't have to. Michael stared at the cold slice in his hand, then turned toward his son. "Lucas, do you forgive me?" Lucas didn't answer right away. He looked at his father's face, the eyes tired, the lines deeper than before, and saw something raw, something real. Regret, yes, but also love, and grief, and humility. "You don't have to say sorry for loving someone," Lucas said softly. "You just wanted to be happy." Michael reached out and pulled him into an embrace. Not rushed, not habitual, but long, intentional. "Have you ever realized too late that the one you overlooked was the one who saw the truth all along?" For the first time in months, Michael didn't fill the silence with explanations. He didn't deflect with optimism. He just held his son and listened to the quiet. In the weeks that followed, they began to rebuild, not just the house, but each other. They went camping. They fished at a lake 2 hours away, laughing at how many times Lucas's line got tangled. They sat by the fire, eating burnt marshmallows and making up stories about stars. There were fewer rules, more questions. "How was your day? Really? What are you thinking about? Do you feel safe now?" Michael learned to listen, not just to words, but to pauses, to lowered eyes, to the way Lucas hesitated before answering. And Lucas, he learned to speak again, not always with sentences, but with presence. With a nudge, a glance, a whispered joke. Healing takes time, but healing also takes effort. And sometimes it takes a shared silence where both people know, "We're still here. We made it through." They were no longer just a father and a son under the same roof. They were a team, two survivors of something almost invisible, but no less real. Something that could have stolen everything, but it didn't, because the one voice that mattered refused to stay silent. The leaves had just begun to turn gold. Crisp air drifted through the open windows of the truck as Michael and Lucas drove along the winding road, headed toward the same state park where, months earlier, they had rediscovered each other. This time, the back seat held a cooler of sandwiches, a camera with a fresh memory card, and 2 rolled-up sleeping bags. It wasn't just a trip. It was a ritual now, their way of remembering not the day everything went wrong, but the day truth triumphed. At the edge of the lake, Lucas helped pitch the tent, with hands steadier than before. Michael set up a small fire pit, humming something tuneless but peaceful. The silence between them was filled with comfort, not avoidance, not fear. Later, as they sat on a blanket watching the sun slide behind the treetops, Michael passed Lucas a bottle of root beer and asked, "Do you remember what today is?" Lucas nodded slowly, eyes on the water. "Yeah, it's the day everything almost ended." Michael looked at him, then gently shook his head. "No, it's the day I realized the most important person in my life was sitting right beside me." They clinked bottles without a word. The fire crackled. An owl called from somewhere in the trees. "Have you ever taken the long way around, only to find the treasure had been in front of you the whole time?" There were no wedding vows that day. No white dress. No flowers. Just a promise. To trust, to listen, to protect each other, especially when the world doesn't believe you the first time. "Dad," Lucas said as the fire began to fade, "do you think people can learn to love better? Like, the right way?" Michael didn't hesitate. "I do, because I did, because of you." They lay back on the blanket, the stars stretching above them like soft, glowing threads. And maybe the happiest endings don't come from perfect weddings or picture book families. Maybe they come from the broken places that get mended with truth, from the people who stay, from the ones who speak up even when their voice shakes. Maybe they come from the echo of a child refusing to be silent. In the end, Lucas didn't raise his voice to be praised. He didn't stop the wedding for attention. He did it because truth, quiet, trembling, and often ignored, deserves to be heard. His strength wasn't loud, it was steady, rooted in love. And sometimes that's the kind of strength that saves a life. Healing doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it's a father finally listening, a son finally smiling, and the silence between them no longer filled with fear. But the journey isn't over. There are still stories to uncover, justice to reclaim, and voices that refuse to be buried in the quiet. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. Sometimes, the loudest truths come from the quietest voices. Lucas was only 8, a child many would overlook, but his heart knew what was right long before the adults around him could see it. This story reminds us that wisdom doesn't always come with age, and that love, when blinded by longing, can sometimes miss the quiet warnings right in front of it. As we grow older, we often seek peace and companionship, but in that search, we must remember to listen, not just with our ears, but with our hearts. The soft hesitations, the silences in conversation, the change in someone's eyes, these are the whispers that speak volumes. And sometimes, the greatest act of courage isn't standing tall, but simply speaking the truth when it's hardest to say. Maybe we all carry a little bit of Lucas inside us, the part that still sees clearly, still hopes purely, and still believes that truth, even when ignored, is worth protecting. In a world that moves quickly and forgets easily, may we slow down, pay closer attention, and never underestimate the quiet strength of those who love us most. In the end, Lucas didn't raise his voice to be praised. He didn't stop the wedding for attention. He did it because truth, quiet, trembling, and often ignored, deserves to be heard. His strength wasn't loud. It was steady, rooted in love, and sometimes that's the kind of strength that saves a life. Healing doesn't always come with fanfare. Sometimes it's a father finally listening, a son finally smiling, and the silence between them no longer filled with fear. But the journey isn't over. There are still stories to uncover, justice to reclaim, and voices that refuse to be buried in the quiet. If this story stayed with you, share it. Subscribe to Echoes of Racism so these voices don't fade into silence. In the meantime, I've chosen 2 stories I think will move you just as much. Take care, and we'll see you soon.